Well, I grew up in Northern Ontario, in Timmins and South Porcupine and other places like that, hardscrabble mining country. My dad was a preacher, and so I grew up in an environment that was shaped very much by the Bible, by Christian life. We didn't have a television until I had left home and gone off to university, so it was a kind of upbringing that is very different from certainly my children and my grandchildren and many people today. I've been married to Lois for 44 years, and we have had a good life together. We have 2 adult children and 2 wonderful grandchildren. Right now we are in the downsized stage of life, living in a condo overlooking Lake Ontario and enjoying the blessings that come with this stage of life. My primary role at Wycliffe is a professor of New Testament studies. So for a long time I've taught a required course in the Gospels. I call it the course I call From the Gospel to the Gospels. Interested in the gospel that stands at the heart of the early church and the heart of the New Testament. And then I teach a variety of elective courses. For the last couple of years, I've had a role as academic dean, trying to keep some of the academic machinery going and the wheels turning. In the first year of my theological studies, it was the course in church history. I began to realize, as we were getting into the 2nd and 3rd century, sometime in October, that we were talking about Gentiles, non-Jews, and yet when the church began, it was all entirely Jewish. And for various reasons, that shift in the shape of the early church caught my attention, and it raised a whole pile of questions. How did it come to be? What are we as non-Jews doing in a religious movement that began rooted in the Jewish world? How do we make sense of a Bible that has both Israel's scriptures and Christian apostolic writings sitting side by side? So in a way, that's been a dominant theme in the research that I've been occupied in for in various ways since then. My doctoral thesis was on the mountain in Matthew's Gospel, and one of the interesting things about that is that even though earlier in Matthew's Gospel Jesus tells his disciples, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the Samaritans, go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But in the Great Commission scene at the end of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus says, go and make disciples of all the nations. From my doctoral work down to the present, I've been interested in various dimensions of that question. How did the community of the lost sheep of the house of Israel become a church gathered from all of the nations of the world? I suppose one of the things that I want to convey in classes and also in adult teaching sessions at various churches is a sense of the gospel, the core message that stands at the heart of both the New Testament and the early church and the church in all its grand diversity through the centuries. So I think it's what I would like to convey is the idea that even though we are very diverse as Christians, both across the world today and down through the centuries, there is something that stands at the heart of the movement, and it's something that we have in common. So my contribution, if you like, is to attempt to draw attention to that core, the gospel that stands at the center, and to give a sense, one, that center is solid and can be trusted, and 2, that if we focus our attention on the center rather than on the various lines we might draw or the circumference, that divides us and people like us from people who aren't like us, the church will be a much healthier thing.